Moinsen, my name is Undine and this is my German language project YouTube channel where I teach you something about German while being puzzled that you want to learn this actually pretty difficult language. But nonetheless, I'm trying to not discourage you, so here we go. Today we're learning about taboos in Germany and topics to maybe avoid or to confront people on if you want to strike up a really weird conversation. The first cliché taboo that foreigners think exists in Germany would be the Holocaust or Nazi history. So now a lot of people think that this is this great taboo because, oh, your grandparents were probably Nazis, and did they personally kill some Jews by any chance? What about your grandma? Was she in the BDM? Like, what's your family history? And for some reason, people seem to believe that this is a taboo, but I actually don't think it is. First of all, we have years of Nazi history in school. I think people get actually fed up with it at some point because it is just so much. And in contrast, you learn very little about other interesting parts of the world because this whole, hey, you gotta understand that this shit was evil thing is just so big in history lessons. And I mean, that's a good thing. You should learn about it, but at the point where we are, I think we would need a separate subject just for Nazi history so that we can learn about the other interesting stuff as well. For instance, the GDR history. I was born in the GDR. I remember part of the GDR. That is interesting too. That's a totalitarian regime that managed to actually survive about 50 years. And it takes up so little space and time in history lessons today. At least as far as I know. So maybe that improved. I'm old, so I might not be super correct on this, but what I've heard from children, that going to school right now, it hasn't changed a lot. So I don't think it is this huge taboo that people actually have because we're very used to talking about this. It is part of our learning culture. It is a normal topic in school. It's a very big topic, and if you grow up in Germany, you will go to a lot of concentration camp sites, and back in the day those were actually led by survivors. Like my mother would vividly recall when she visited Buchenwald and a survivor would tell their story and they could see the old barracks there, which are now torn down because there was some biohazard or I don't know, but they were torn down, so you cannot actually see how horrible that looks today. There are only photos of that, and she saw it firsthand, so she remembers how that actually looked, and that was back in the GDR. Versus I remember that when my school actually went there were two kids about 15 or 16 years old, and they wrote some nasty shit in the visitor's book up there, like, oh, they deserve that or something like this. This is how little of a taboo this actually is. And there are still neo-Nazis today in Germany, and people, they think this is funny or okay to joke about that kind of thing. So I would say the way bigger taboo than the Holocaust are the neo-Nazis that still exist and the everyday racism. And if you confront people about the everyday racism, for instance in Bavaria, where I live, and this kind of nonchalant Ausländer comment that you make about foreigners or Muslims or whatever culture you're not accustomed to, that kind of thing, if you confront that, people will be, no, like, it's not like that. What kind of people did you meet? I know nobody who's like that, and that's not a problem. Like, maybe in certain groups, but not really. And they will get super defensive. For me, that is kind of always a red flag, and I don't like it when people get defensive instead of listening and saying, like, why do you think that? Have you experienced that? Do you really believe that? I personally live by the principle ask, don't assume. And that means if you find yourself confronted with something that you don't agree with, you better ask. You better ask, why is this person confronting you? What are their intentions and why do they feel that way? This makes for a much better conversation, and I don't think that Germans are good at it actually. And the next true taboo would actually be Jewish culture, because Germans don't know a lot about Jewish culture, in my opinion. I mean, we put concrete plates up and memorials, and we do ceremonies years after years to memorize the Holocaust, but most Germans don't know about Shabbos. They don't know about Jewish culture. They don't know about even some basic Yiddish words. I mean, I think once my school class visited a synagogue and listened to some generic talk And that's it. You learn nothing about the active Jewish culture in Germany, and there is one. So I think it's kind of phony to put up these plates saying stuff like, "Bitte komm zurück, please come back," to the European Jews that left. Please come back? Okay. You don't even know about Jewish culture. So yeah, I think this is the way bigger taboo here in Germany, the Jewish culture, and being completely uncomfortable with it and not knowing what is cool, what is not cool to say, how Jews actually live, like not just the Orthodox that you read about in the books, but normal Jewish people today. How do they live? So if you really want to weird out a German, ask them about that. The next big taboo that will actually help you strike up a really awkward conversation would be death and everything related to it. I don't think that there is a topic more awkward to Germans than that. It's rooted so deep in our culture and personality that we can't even put a finger on why it is so weird. But you will see people in their midlife crisis being awkward. You will see people getting older being awkward. We have this huge culture of prolonging life more than necessary and torturing people in homes for the elderly. We try to prolong life to the full extent of the medicine. It's really crazy. And we're hurting people doing that. I've worked in a nursery home actually, and I think we're hurting a lot of people, and it's earning other people money, and it's crazy and sick. And I think that a lot of Germans are really, really afraid of death and that their life will end at some point. And maybe it comes from the fact that we used to have this crazy work ethic. That means that you do over hours basically for free, and if not for free, then you still do so many extra hours that you will never have them paid out to you or something. And I've seen that in so many companies where I've worked, and people are just in this hamster wheel. Your life kind of starts after work. And for a lot of people, life starts when they stop working. And then they have just a few years left and they start traveling and doing what they wanted to do their whole life. Or people put their life on hold because of kids and postpone everything. And this postponing thing and just traveling to, like, let's say like the one or two same places for 20 years, that's a very, very German thing. So I think a lot of Germans suffer from FOMO, fear of missing out. And that really hits them when they get to the age of 40 or 50, and then death and essentially not having a lot of time to do a lot of awesome things. That just hits us, so we don't like to talk about it. And last but not least, what we also hate to talk about more than anything else is money. How we invest our money, how much money we actually earn. That's things people don't like to talk about. Also, how much rent we pay for the apartments we live in. Because there's always this fear, oh, so your apartment is that much cheaper. Duh, I'm at a really bad deal here. Like, our apartment costs 1.2k a month, and that is called Warmmiete, warm rent, which includes heating and warm water. It's a pretty good deal for a 3-bedroom apartment, and for the quarter where we live in Munich, which is one of the most expensive cities. And rents here are crazy. People like to downplay it a little bit, as in, yeah, well, it's just Munich. You know, if you don't like it, you don't have to move here unless you can't find a job anywhere else. Then you kind of have to move here and deal with it. And how the heck am I supposed to be okay and happy with this and not complain about it just because I literally had no choice other than coming here, because the industry I work in is basically only here, and in another city that was even worse? Please, people, please, Germans, think about this shit before you open your mouth. So this is a huge taboo, talking about this, talking about what you spend on rent, what you spend on living costs and inflation in general. People don't like to talk about it. And in the economy crisis, late 2000s, there was actually this phenomenon that all the countries in the federal states in Germany, they were like leveling down their expenses, except for one, and that was Thuringia, and people were just spending more because they didn't want to have it. But I think this is so typical, and actually the economy went up pretty fast after that, and I think that's so typical for Germans to just shut their eyes, shut down, not look at the problem and say like, I'm gonna live my life, I'm gonna spend my money, and I'm not going to think about this now. They're avoiding death and they're avoiding money issues. And then they end up poor. I think that most Germans have a really poor money mindset, and you often see this kind of behavior where they just shut down and be like, I don't want to deal with this right now. I'm just going to save some money. I'm not going to worry about how much my bank account costs, how much inflation there is right now. And I don't want to worry about this. If I just hustle enough, if I just work enough and have a good paying job, I will not have to worry about this. I will get some pension in the end. No, you won't. And people don't like to deal with that kind of stuff. They don't like to talk about it. It goes that far that there are organizations trying to help women because women are most affected by this, because a lot of women up until this day still rely on their husbands to bring home the bacon and kind of include them in their pension somehow when they get older. But then they get divorced, like 50% or more of people, and they end up being poor when they're old, which is the worst time to be poor. You're supposed to be poor when you're a student, not when you're old. You're supposed to have like an apartment you can pay for, to go meet your friends and have coffee every once in a while, to travel, because why the heck did you hustle for your entire life if then you can't even afford to stay in a city you have lived in for the last 20 years maybe? Take Munich, for example. It's just not a city for your average grandmother who has like a small pension. It's a city for lawyers and orthopedic surgeons. So that's it, you guys. I hope you learned something about German cliché taboos. If you have any more taboos or clichés you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments. And if you find it in your heart, could you please kick the like button and the subscribe button in the ass for me so that you're subscribed and never miss one of my insightful Germany rants. Tschüss! I had a D in history, so my history teacher was also my sports teacher, and she hated me because I was not athletic. So let's just say just got a parcel. I just had to run outside and get a parcel, and now I have my parcel, and it's full of figure skating stuff for my kid because she loves figure skating and I do too. Anyway, figure skating in German, Schlittschuhlaufen.